the dim, quiet town of Maple Hollow, night stretched long and deep, swallowing the sparse sounds of day. There was a young man, Toby, whose heart was attuned to these quiet hours, when shadows grew long and the whisper of wind through the trees sang lullabies. But on this particular night, as darkness crept over his small, creaky house on Elderwood Lane, a sinister chill settled in the air, and the comforting quiet turned into a heavy, oppressive silence. Toby, a curious soul of just 18, often found solace in the quiet nights, reading by the dim glow of his bedside lamp. Tonight, his book lay forgotten, its pages limp in the stagnant air. Every creak and sigh of the old house seemed louder, closer, and more intentional. Toby's room felt smaller, the walls inching closer with each passing hour. His eyes darted to the window where the curtain fluttered ever so slightly as if disturbed. He told himself it was just the wind, but the night was still, too still. From somewhere deep in the house, a sound, a soft, deliberate tapping began. Toby's heart raced. He wasn't alone. His mind raced through rational explanations, each less convincing than the last. Perhaps it was just the house settling, or maybe some small animal had found its way inside. But the tapping grew louder, clearer, more demanding. It was coming from downstairs. Summoning courage he barely felt, Toby crept to his door and pressed his ear against the cool wood. Silence, then footsteps, heavy and slow, prowling across the creaking floorboards below. Toby's breath was caught in his throat. The intruder was inside, moving with a purposeful stride, coming up the stairs now. He should run, hide, escape, but his legs wouldn't move, frozen by a terror that clutched his chest with icy fingers. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, and then, with a resolve that made Toby's blood run cold, they turned toward his room. Toby's door creaked open, a sliver of darkness peering through the widening gap. In the doorway stood a man, tall and thin, his eyes gleaming with a madness that danced in the dim light. His smile was a gash of malice, his intentions clear in the glint of the knife he twirled idly in one hand.
"I've been watching you, Toby,"
the man whispered, his voice a serpentine hiss that slithered into the room.
"You're all alone tonight, aren't you?"
Toby could not speak, could barely breathe. The man stepped closer, the knife catching the light, a promise of pain.
"Yes, all alone, and so very, very vulnerable."
The room seemed to spin as Toby backed against the wall, nowhere to go, his eyes fixed on the gleaming blade. The man's smile widened, his steps slow, deliberate.
"Don't worry, Toby. I'll make sure you're not alone for long. I'll stay with you, right to the very end."
Toby's scream was a choked sob as the man lunged, the knife descending. But at that moment, Toby's survival instinct surged. He ducked, the blade slicing the air above him, and bolted for the door. He scrambled down the hallway, the man's laughter chasing him like the echoes of a nightmare. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, Toby ran as though the devil himself were on his heels. Behind him, the house echoed with the man's insane cackles, a symphony of terror that seemed to fill the night. Into the woods at the edge of town, Toby fled, branches clawing at his face, roots threatening to trip him. But he dared not stop, not even to catch his breath. Behind him, somewhere in the shadows, he knew the man was there, following and pursuing his every step. As the night stretched on, Toby's fear never waned, the sense of being hunted driving him deeper into the darkness. The man's presence was a constant pressure at the back of his mind, a looming threat that promised no escape. And in Maple Hollow, as dawn crept timidly over the horizon, Toby was still running. The terror of the night etched forever in his eyes, the laughter of the man a haunting terror that would never quite leave him. For in Maple Hollow, some nights were longer than others, and some fears lingered long after the darkness had lifted. In the dark embrace of the night, in a quaint, creaky house at the edge of the old woods, two best friends, Nicole and Jenny, found themselves wrapped in the comfort of warm blankets and the thrill of ghostly tales. Their laughter filled the air, a brief solace from the eerie silence that loomed outside. Little did they know, their night of fun would soon turn into a chilling ordeal. As the wind howled like the whispers of the damned, the electricity flickered and then went out, plunging the room into darkness. The girls, startled but not yet scared, lit candles, their flames casting long, sinister shadows across the walls. It was then they heard it, a faint scraping, like nails on wood, coming from the front door. "Probably just a branch," Jenny whispered, her voice a mix of doubt and hope. Nicole nodded, trying to believe it, but the scraping grew louder, more desperate. Then, with a thud that made them both jump, the noise ceased. Silence reigned, thick and suffocating. Curiosity edged by fear, Nicole tiptoed to the window, peering out into the blackness. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, in the dim light of the moon, stood a figure, tall and ominous. The face was hidden behind a mask, horribly disfigured, a grotesque mockery of a human appearance, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the glass straight into Nicole's soul. She gasped and stumbled back, clutching Jenny's arm. "Someone's out there," she breathed, her voice trembling. Who is it?" Jenny stammered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but we need to make sure all the doors are locked," Nicole said, trying to muster courage she didn't feel. They moved quickly, securing each door, the heavy clanks of the lock sounding unusually ominous in the darkened house. But as they checked the back door, they froze. Mud-stained footprints led up to the doorway and then inside. "He's already here," Jenny whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. The air grew thick with terror. The house seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, as if it breathed in their fear and exhaled dread. The friends clung to each other, straining their ears for any sound. A soft, dragging footstep echoed from the hallway, then another, each one chipping away at their sanity. We should run, hide, but where?" Nicole stammered. The house was old, full of hiding spots, but none seemed safe enough. They chose the cellar, a dark, cobweb-filled space beneath the house. The door creaked loudly as they opened it, the sound a stark announcement of their location. Descending into the darkness, they dared not speak, communicating in hushed breaths and tight grips on each other's hands. The cellar was cold, damp, the air thick with the smell of mold and something worse, something metallic, like blood. Time stretched into eternity as they huddled in the dark. Then, suddenly, a series of loud crashes came from above. The psychopath was searching for them, tearing through the house with violent frenzy. Each thump and bang above made the girls flinch. Tears streamed down their cheeks, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Then silence, more terrifying than the noises before. Had he left, or was he standing, listening, just as they were? The silence stretched on, until it was broken by a chilling sound, soft, slow applause, echoing down the halls to the cellar. He was mocking them, applauding their fear. In a moment of desperation, Nicole whispered, "We need to leave, now. We'll run for the woods. It's our only chance." Gathering the last shreds of their bravery, they sprinted from the cellar, across the moonlit yard, towards the shadowy embrace of the woods. Behind them, the house seemed to groan, a final farewell from the nightmare within. But the woods were not a sanctuary. Branches grabbed at their clothes like the hands of the dead. Thorns scratched their faces, and all the while, they heard it. The steady, relentless pursuit of the disfigured psychopath, his breaths heavy in the chilling night air. As they ran, the truth dawned on them. The woods, this game of cat and mouse, the terror, it was his domain, his playground. And as the night swallowed their cries, the only witnesses to their plight were the creepy old trees and the cold silvery moon. Eventually, they made it through an opening in the woods to find a road. As they flagged down a passing car, a wave of hope came over them that maybe, just maybe, there was an escape from this living nightmare after all. In the sleepy town of Willow Creek, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind and shadows lingered longer than they should, lived Nina. Nina was a solitary soul, preferring the company of books to people. Her life a routine of predictable comforts. But the tranquility of her world was about to be shattered by a visitor not bound by human decency or sanity. It began on a night swallowed by a fog so thick it seemed to devour the very air. Nina was walking home from her job at the local library, the streets eerily deserted, the silence punctuated only by her footsteps echoing against the damp cobblestones. As she passed the old carnival grounds, abandoned years ago, a chill ran down her spine. The gates, usually secured by chains and a padlock, were inexplicably open, swinging gently as if beckoning her inside. Curiosity overcame caution, and Nina peered into the darkness beyond the gate. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom, and that's when she saw it. A silhouette, horribly disproportionate, with limbs too long and a head too big. It was a creepy clown, its costume a patchwork of nightmarish colors, its face hidden beneath layers of peeling, cracked paint. The clown stood perfectly still, as if it had been waiting for her. Nina turned to leave, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm, but as she did, a childlike giggle sliced through the silence, freezing her in her tracks. The sound was close, far too close. She whipped around, but the figure was gone. Thinking it a figment of her imagination, Nina quickened her pace, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the carnival grounds. That night, as Nina lay in bed, the unsettling feeling of being watched crept over her. She reassured herself it was just the remnants of the evening's fright playing tricks on her mind. But then, the soft, sinister giggle echoed in the distance. Her eyes snapped open, and there, through the window, in the dimly moonlit yard, stood the clown, its smile too wide, its eyes hollow pits of madness. Nina screamed, bolting from her bed and rushing to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself conspired to keep her trapped. The clown's giggle grew into a symphony of madness, bouncing off the walls, surrounding her in sounds of terror.
"I've come to play, Nina,"
the clown hissed, its voice a whisper of decay. It advanced slowly, deliberately. A gleaming knife appeared in its hand.
"Let's play a game of hide and seek. You hide, and I'll find you. And when I do..."
The promise hung in the air, heavy with malice. Nina hid under her bed, her breath shallow, her body trembling uncontrollably. The front door flew open with a loud crash. She could hear the clown surging in the house, the slow, dragging steps accompanied by that incessant, maddening giggle.
"Where are you, Nina?"
It called, a sing-song voice that belonged in a child's nightmare.
Come out, wherever you are."
It felt like hours had passed, but it was impossible to tell in the timeless terror of her predicament. Eventually, the house grew silent. Cautiously, Nina crawled from her hiding spot, her muscles stiff, her body aching from fear. The clown was nowhere to be seen, but the feeling of dread lingered, a tangible presence in her once safe home. Days turned into weeks, and the clown haunted her both in dreams and in waking moments. It appeared without warning, each visit more terrifying than the last, each game more twisted. Nina's life became a hellish loop of hide and seek, her home now a prison of shadows and fear. And through it all, Nina was alone, completely alone with her tormentor, her screams unheard, her plight unseen. In the end, all that was left of Nina was a story, a cautionary tale whispered by the residents of Willow Creek. They spoke of the girl who wandered too close to the old carnival grounds, of the clown who came to play a game with no end, and they shivered, knowing that somewhere in the shadows, the giggling still echoed, hungry for the next game to begin.